This is where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And tonight, is Joe Biden's woke worldview putting America at risk? After all, the Pentagon seems more concerned with virtue signaling than protecting the world's largest superpower, trumpeting diversity days and culturally sensitive food for Afghan refugees, while facilitating the Taliban's return to power. Meanwhile, America's top general, Mark Milley, has recommended soldiers read the controversial race activist Ibram X. Kendi and its learnings about critical race theory. And they say they're essential when recruits could be learning how to stay alive in a war zone. Really? In his new book, The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America, esteemed academic and historian Victor Davis Hanson warns of the dangers of wokeness creeping into areas of defense and public policy and demands answers from the White House. Victor, it's great to have you here on Uncancelled.
Yeah.
Look, talk to me about what's going on at the Pentagon. It sometimes seems like they're more concerned, Victor, with the culture war than actual wars.
Yeah, I think when you look at all the ribbons on their chest, they don't represent dramatic victories in Libya or Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan necessarily. So I think these people say they're apolitical, but they're not because they're careerists. And we've created this huge unaccountable bureaucracy in general. We saw it with James Comey at the FBI, John Brennan at the CIA. And they feel that they're immune from accountability. So General Milley has told us that he is apolitical, but he was the source for every muckraking left-wing novel, investigative book or expose of the last 4 or 5 years. He says that he understands the Joint Chiefs have no operational command, so he's not responsible for Afghanistan. He's not in the chain of command, but he is in the chain of command when he postulates that Donald Trump is unhinged and might be not trustworthy with the nuclear code. So therefore, he's going to intervene in the chain of command and say, nothing goes down the chain of command unless I'm included. And so his whole testimony was a mishmash of I don't have responsibility when it goes bad, but I do if people approve of it and the left approve of it. And then behind all of this, your question about the Pentagon is this revolving door. Secretary Austin from Raytheon to the Pentagon back to Raytheon, the former secretary from General Dynamics into the Pentagon and back again. All of these generals have found out that the left will silence their criticism of serving on corporate defense contractor boards in exchange for fast-tracking woke issues, transgenderism, women in combat, pregnant women's new air suits. We in Afghanistan, at the moment of our fall, we had a pride flag, a gender studies program at Kabul University, George Floyd girls. These are the pretensions and the arrogance of a imperial power bloated with victories and confidence and arrogance, not a power, scampering in retreat and defeat and humiliation. So they've combined the worst of both worlds. And I don't know whether it's the cause and effect or what's going on, whether they're distracted or what.
And you point out some really shocking real-world examples, Victor. I mean, I couldn't believe this. On the day of that terrible attack in Kabul that killed all of those American troops, the Sergeant Major of the US Army instead actually tweeted that diversity is our strength, commemorating not the dead, but Women's Equality Day. I mean, that's tone deaf.
Yeah. How about General McKenzie and others were reassuring us that the refugees who were coming in without vaccinations at a number of 100,000 strong, and we're going to be guarded and escorted by U.S. soldiers who, even if they had COVID, and did not want and had antibodies but did not want a vaccination, they would be given a dishonorable discharge. But we didn't ask anything of our new guests. No vaccinations, no tests. And then we were assured that they had culturally sensitive food as they approached. So something has gone haywire with all of this wokeness, and it is a distraction because people feel that they will be assessed on non-meritocratic criteria. How woke they are, whether they won the battle or they inflicted damage on the enemy or they had strategic resolution and victory. But that's not part of the issue now. And the irony about these generals who are going through the Pentagon rosters, scouting out supposed white supremacists, is that there's no evidence that they were there, but their creed is disproportional representation. And if we don't have proportional representation by tribe, and then we have to have remedies. But the people they're going after, the lower white middle class, have died in numbers double their percentages in the population in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And yet we would never dare mention that because it's a regressive tribal idea. But they are tribalists themselves, and they ignore all of these inconvenient facts. So we're destroying the demographic that feeds the Pentagon in our most dangerous front war deployments and theaters. And I don't know why we're doing this, but we're sending a message to the lower middle class, most often white. You're suspect. We're going to rout you out. You're not woke. You better read the Kendi books on critical race theory about how to use racism to fight racism. And by the way, you're going to continue to die and double your numbers in places like Afghanistan. And don't dare mention that while we mention other racial rubrics that are convenient to our agenda.
And Victor, is it really true that Mark Milley recommended soldiers read a book by Ibram X. Kendi about critical race theory?
Yeah, it is. He testified that under oath, but what was incoherent about it, he did so in the larger context of quote unquote, know your enemy. So he was defending this sort of bankrupt idea by suggesting that he reads Mao and he reads Marx, and then he would say, these are the enemies of the United States, and that's why I read Kendi. But of course, he was entirely incoherent because he was putting Kendi on a recommended list that people should read for emulation and insight and revelation. So he really didn't know what he was saying. And this is all in a larger landscape that he was supposedly a bibliophile. He had a Princeton degree. He had thousands of volumes. He's an intellectual. And yet every time he comes before Congress or in the general public domain, he's partisan, he's incoherent, he's half-educated, and he's quite confident and arrogant. So it's frightening that we keep, in America in this generation, we keep promoting people like Dr. Fauci or Mark Milley, or James Comey or John Brennan, these lifelong bureaucratic apparat checks who are not accountable to the elected officials or the electorate themselves.